Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Craft Beer Professionals Beer Panel. My name is Mike Paladino, here with Stout Tanks. We're going to have a group of brewers here to talk about their experiences and journey as starting up a brewery during our pandemic that we've all had to deal with during these last 2 years roughly. But I think we'll have a good idea of how three different brewers have adjusted, taken their journeys, some of the things that brewers can learn from what they've had successes at, and maybe some of the things that we can kind of look forward to in the industry. So I have a few years of brewing experience based out of Portland, Oregon. I've been working with Stout Tanks for almost 4 years now, and loving it ever since. I've been able to have relationships with brewers that we see in front of us and more, and that is exciting for me to kind of help brewers pass knowledge, and hopefully we can keep passing some more knowledge. Don, who's joining us here with Stout Tanks, you can want to tell a little bit about yourself, and then maybe
Sure.
pass the torch.
Yeah, similar to Mike, I have near a decade of experience commercial brewing, and then have been with Stout for just about 6 months less than Mike has. But been putting out quite a few different systems, and enjoying the fact that I can still be a part of the beer community and keep those relationships going, which is great. So with that in mind, I think what we're going to probably do is I'm going to just quickly go over some of the structure. I figure we have 3 panelists. We'll do somewhere in there of about 8 to 10 minutes. And we can kind of do that on the fly. If there's less or more, it's not a big deal. And then towards the end, we'll just have a couple questions. We'll kind of run through and see what each of you kind of thinks about those. And that should pretty well fill up our time. But we're going to kind of, run it by the seat of our pants here and see what we can do. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to start off with Amelia, who I have been fortunate enough to work with, and am so glad to see her having her own business now and being able to be a brewery owner, and couldn't be happier for you. And I'm excited as much as everybody else just to hear a little bit about what you experienced, and maybe some highs, some lows, and hopefully a little insight for everyone that's trying to potentially do the same thing and break through during this interesting time. So Amelia, let you take it over.
Everyone. And nice to see you too, Don. Don and I used to work together at a brewery in Portland, Oregon for several years. So we both got our start there, and obviously have continued on in the industry. I moved back to my hometown after working at a brewery there for 7 years. And then got a job with a brewery here Against the Grain, with the intent. In both circumstances, I thought I was going to cut my teeth, get in there, get to be head brewer in 3 years, and then start a brewery. And both ended up being 7-year kind of stints. But at Against the Grain, I was the head pub brewer for 5.5 years. And then in December 2019, I decided I was finally going to quit and start my own place up. I had a real estate developer who had a property that I was really interested in, just a little distance from downtown, actually on the other side of Main Street from Against the Grain, and felt really excited and confident, and had a group of investors, and we're building momentum, had talked about getting financing, and everything was going my way. And then March hit, and had to hit pause on everything because I had no idea, considering that everything was in lockdown, whether people were going to pull money out, whether anybody would be willing to finance me, considering that we were not in a position to understand or estimate when anyone would be making a considerable profit again, and still are kind of dancing in that zone. And definitely doing things on a very low-key basis from the get-go. And then just had to really pivot hard in April and reevaluate some things. I was lucky because everybody who had invested continued to have confidence in me and what I was doing. But I'd only reached about 60% of my investment goal. As far as financing went, everybody that I talked to about financing equipment was like, "Nah, go. Like you can't actively and accurately project revenue, so no way." And so then I got an actual call from the city who I'd talked to about just getting loans because they do loans for new businesses, specifically because I'm in an economic development area of the city. They are actively targeting, places like where I've opened up. And I'd already been looking at a loan for the facade and a loan for handicap bathroom access and those kinds of things. And my impression is that they had a certain level of federal money that they had been allocated that they needed to use that year, or else it was going to be gone. And I was the only one that was still in planning and hadn't just kind of scrapped and given up. So I decided that I would do the brewery build out and equipment in year 2 and just focus on getting the tap room open with a little pilot system and do contract brewing and a lot of collaborations, which my experience at Against the Grain was great for because I've collaborated with people all over the world. So I knew how to run that kind of program and the benefit of that. So I changed my business plan entirely and got the tap room funded and went that direction.
Excellent.
Oh, I never said the name. It's Shippingport Brewing Company.
Yeah, there we go. Very important part of it, but yeah, that's.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that?
I said, where are you located?
Oh, in Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah,
Awesome.
I did a bad job of introducing that. Sorry, guys.
Sorry. I think one of the biggest things I took. One of the biggest things that I take away from that is the fact that you just didn't give up, and that really kind of led to you benefiting because you were tenacious at keeping going and keeping your goal, and I think that's great, and hopefully the benefits that you got from that really came into making that a reality for you. So that's awesome.
I think that one of the biggest takeaways for me is just as a small business owner, in general, you've got to be adaptable and you've got to be able to pivot and you've got to be able to just problem solve with the resources that you have, because there's always granted, this challenge was a bigger challenge than anyone could ever foresee. And I am extremely lucky to have been able to work it out. But if you're inflexible in a startup scenario, you're not going to make it, because the challenges that you face that you never saw coming, let alone a global pandemic, they're going to be multitudinous. And if they're not, then you are much luckier and better financed than I am. But I'd also been working towards this goal for about 15 years. And at that point, the thought of just putting everything on pause and then trying to find some other job within a different industry because everything was shut down, I was just I think I just have to see it through. And if the financing that I did get hadn't presented itself, I was probably looking at that. But for me, sometimes I wonder whether it was wise for me to keep on moving forward anyways. But the reality is that doors just kept on opening and the path was never entirely blocked. It just required a lot more innovative problem solving than I had hoped it had. But, you just learn to consistently problem solve on the fly. I think that's what probably everybody here has experienced.
Sure.
Yeah, I think brewer's way.
I think that's the brewer's way. I think you nailed it right there, Amelia. I mean, a lot of us have, had to, do what you need to do to get it done. I think if Andy, if you want to kind of take it from there and give your experience, and you've had a lot of things that you've had to adjust along the way, even very recent. So want to tell your journey and where you're coming from, Andy?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm one of those incredibly intelligent people that thought, hey, opening a nano brewery out of my garage sounds like a great idea. Which is basically, my homebrew hobby got out of control. So I started that up, actually got licensed in 2017. That's about when I met Mike, actually, for the first time. I used to be a garbage man, and we picked up one of the breweries he was brewing at. And so I'd see him every Friday and kind of chat about how things were going and stuff. Yeah, so just kind of slowly building just, a little bit of a name for ourselves and getting, stuff dialed in. For me, it was great learning as a nano because I didn't come from a professional brewing background. I just, like I said, home brewing got out of control. And next thing I knew, I had a licensed brewery in my garage because if they let me, why not? And so fast forward a few years, kind of reached a spot where it was time to take it to the next level. My brother-in-law at the time, well, he's still my brother-in-law, but at the time, his wonderful insurance job fired him, and he was ready to be done with that world. So he ended up partnering up with me, and we kind of started moving towards expanding and getting a new space, like getting an actual taproom space, getting a bigger brewery production, everything with it. So in our it's hard to time things as well as we did, but in January, we signed a lease. January 2020, we signed a lease on a taproom space, and then the next month, we signed a lease on a big warehouse that I'm actually sitting in right now to build out a brewery and open a taproom in that space as well. And got our taproom open on March 6, 2020, which is hard to time it that well, but we got open. And then, 10 days later, our entire business model had to shift. So after, luckily, Oregon allowed us to do get a license for same day home delivery. So it was the fastest I've ever received a government application approval. It took about 8 minutes, and I got an email saying we're good to go. So we literally just had a big pink sign made out of cardstock because it was bright and would catch people's eye that said, like, text me for beer deliveries, and it had my phone number on it. And amazingly enough, people started just texting me like, hey, are you the guy that brings beer? And I was like, yep, what do you want? And so we just started delivering. I know I've delivered to Mike and Don and all over Portland. And so for the next year and a half, we just started canning everything by hand with our Blickman beer gun and an October can seamer. So since March of 2020, I think we're pushing about 60,000 cans by hand now. So we're still doing it the same way. We do have a small.
That's incredible, by the way.
Thank you. It's literally very painful because your arm cramps up after about 5 cases and doing 30 or 40. I'm familiar
with those repetitive stress injuries for sure. So yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, my brother-in-law Keith, after like 2 or 3 months of doing it, because he started on the filling side, like he got really bad tendonitis, and it's just now starting to heal after a year and a half. But yeah, it was just kind of doing whatever we had to do because at that point we were paying on a warehouse space that we couldn't use, still going out of my garage, selling out of the tap room. It was only a few months until we were able to have people in, built an outdoor space, and kind of made it a good little neighborhood spot. Yeah, it's just been constantly having to shift on the fly. Because also right around the time we signed the leases, we were working with Mike and we got a system kind of designed and ready to go. And then, got financing through a leasing company and all ready to go, got everything finalized, set up, implemented. And then that was probably a week before COVID. So, in all of it, it's just the timing's been rough, but at the same time, just, I don't know if it's our stupidity, stubbornness, or just determination to make this work. We just keep pressing on. And now we're hopefully a few days away from opening our taproom space at the brewery location. I had 3 different inspectors come today, and we passed all 3. Well, just varying degrees, but it's progress. So we just have a few more to go this week. So we're looking forward to actually getting to have people in our space, just trying to think. And also it's so much of that we've had to shift of, trying to make sure there's, ample air movement, that it's a safe space, that it's going to be welcoming to people, that it's something memorable, like all of these little things that you just have to be able to shift on the fly. And I think honestly, being a small brewery has allowed us to do that because we can pivot a lot quicker. like there's two of us to make a decision, and that's it. So it's, if we're going to do something, we just do it right then and turn and we run. Well, as you know, and it's not to say, because large breweries have an advantage over us small breweries in that they have distribution networks and like huge resources and much deeper pockets than we have. But just kind of the ability to maneuver quickly, as well as try to meet people's meet their hopes, meet what people are looking for, trying to just put out the best product we can and share our story with people. And luckily, people have, I don't know, I feel like we've found some great people along the way that have definitely helped in many different ways, like whether it's electricians who have volunteered their time to come in after hours just to help run conduit for us. I mean, having contractors okay with other people doing stuff as long as it's meeting code. Also almost all the construction we've been doing ourselves just out of necessity. It helps to have a construction background, but all sorts of things that just figure it out and do it. And I think that's a big part of starting a brewery is you quickly, if you don't know already, you quickly need to become a plumber, an electrician, and a welder, and a mason, and like any trade there is, you got to be able to dabble in it because that's the only way to get stuff done a lot of the time, or to keep it within your budget.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. You're wearing lots of hats, lots of boots, lots of gloves as a brewer, and then don't forget that you're a small business owner. So then add all the financing portion and management of the financing or management of people underneath there as well. That's a whole nother juggling act. I think that may be a good point to send over maybe to John here to tell his story. I think you're muted there, John. Perfect. Yeah, tell a little bit about yourself, John, and your brewery, where you're at, and how you got your similar experience to some of the rest of us here who have started during this time.
Yeah, so hi, everybody. My name is John Bieranoski. I am co-owner and head brewer at Allusion Brewing Company in a tiny little town called Vandergrift, Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes northeast of Pittsburgh, PA. Like Andrew, unfortunately, I wish it was more like Amelia with all that background and everything. But like Andrew, it was the 12 years of homebrewing experience and tired of people taking all my beer when I brewed it and begging me to open a place up. And we just decided to open someplace up. But for us, just like Amelia and Andrew have said, it's being adaptable. Now, our timing was a little bit different than theirs. My business partner and I, we had actually been able to lock down our financing. I think I'd actually been annoying Mike for about almost a full year with equipment. He kept every month asking if we were ready, and every month I'd be like, in a minute. But we were able to get that all locked down, our building and everything. For us here, though, what happened was our equipment was delivered in February. We got everything installed, and on March 1st, I was supposed to brew my first batch of beer to get ready for a spring opening. And then the pandemic hit, and Pennsylvania basically shut down. So our contractors, any contractors we had, were told, you're not permitted to work. So we lost all our contractors. Everything just ground to a complete halt. And that's where it becomes great. We have the financing, but now we're going to be behind on being able to start those payments like we're supposed to. So to Andrew's point, you quickly become a plumber, carpenter, things like that. We ended up having to do a lot of stuff ourselves. But then also it was just reaching out and finding contacts in the community, finding those folks that were willing to assist and volunteer. For us, it delayed our opening. We were able to open up in October of 2020, October 10th, actually. And of course, we opened on October 10th. And about 2.5 weeks later, at the beginning of November, Pennsylvania completely shut down. They didn't even let anybody go out anywhere. So right in the middle of the holiday, we were shut down for about 2 months. So that's where we had to really get creative. So in our budget, we had never thought, we kind of towards what Amelia was saying. It was sort of like that slow ramp up is what we were planning on. Let's get started with the tap room. Let's have people come in as we're getting that funding in. Now we can expand into canning or bottling or whatever. But we had to make a quick turnaround. So everything being delayed, what we ended up doing is, again, beer guns and Oktoberfest canning machines, Seamers. They were able to get us 2 of them within like 4 weeks, which was amazing. And we just started canning crowlers and 16 ounces by hand and getting them out the door however we could to get us through that period. We were lucky enough, as I'm sure Andrew and Amelia can probably say as well, our local community was such a support as well. We are in sort of like a depressed area that's looking to revitalize itself, and they did not want a business to come in and have problems. So they really did, they got the word out there for us. Another thing that we did to help counteract was social media. Social media was huge for us, letting folks know, when beer releases were coming, what we had available to put out there. So it is really just, we were able to make it through those couple hard months. And then as Pennsylvania started to open back up, we were able to make some additional adjustments, get some more folks in the door as well. One of the things we really did is my business partner, Robert, worked heavily on speaking with restaurants and distributors and things like that for when things opened back up, we were ready to begin distribution. That way we could just jump right in. Of course, what that resulted in is we got a lot more than we thought we were going to need. So now we are in the process of expanding, which is actually pretty amazing for being in the pandemic. But we've been able to be successful enough that we purchased the building right next door to us. We're going to start expanding here soon, hopefully getting more equipment in March. We were able to purchase a semi-automatic canning line from Wild Goose, which is allowing us to pump out more cans at a faster pace. But then with that, now we're running into the can shortage. So I think one of the biggest things that Robert and I found out is, just like Andrew and Amelia, being flexible, being able to move, being able to make a decision and change on the dime when you have to, and not being afraid to walk through those doors that open up. A lot of times people are like, hey, I'm not taking that risk. That's just too much. Can't do it. Sometimes you can't be afraid. You just have to walk through the door. So one of the biggest words of advice that I can give is don't be afraid to reach out to your counterparts. I was a home brewer coming into the professional ranks, but I reached out and talked to everyone. If you're within a 20-mile radius of my brewery as another brewer, I know who you are. And because of that, we were able to get together last month, one of the larger breweries around the area that has a large storage facility. With the announcement of the canning shortage, we just all got together and we're like, hey, let's just all get together. Let's put our funds together. We're going to buy as many cans as we can get. They hold them for us. We just go and get them as we need them, stuff like that. So you have to be willing to work with your fellow brewers in the area, fellow business owners in the area. Don't be afraid to reach out to other types of businesses that might be willing to run promotions, do things like that, and work for you.
Yeah, that's excellent to hear that. Just the brewing community was already strong to begin with, and the pandemic, being able to reach out to other breweries in your area, other businesses, just strengthening that bond out there. Even though there are 9,000 plus breweries in the United States, there's still plenty of room for more. Everybody's got their own little section of neighborhood and inviting area for people to be in. So that's great, though. With that in mind, I guess, and some of you may have already kind of covered this, but one of the first kind of questions that comes to mind is, we all know that there's a lot of bad that came from COVID coming through, but like, what was probably your biggest positive that came out of it as far as, starting up and getting your brewery going? Maybe it was just somebody that helped you out that you weren't expecting, or any number of other things that happened with the open. But that's kind of our first question that we have going on there. So I'll start with Amelia then.
Cool, because I was just going to start. Very similar to what John was saying. Definitely the fact that we all know that like the brewing community is tightly knit, and it is like a business community that still, even like 15 years after I started in it, like has the mentality of like, the rising tide raises all ships. I basically, having not like a full scale brewery, basically nano brewing to start because I couldn't do the build out, started contract brewing, and like the people who like offered to help in that zone and then who I ended up working with. Are you guys hearing background noise? Is that getting obnoxious?
Not very much.
Good. Sorry. The people that I ended up working with have been like hugely helpful, extremely flexible, and wonderful to work with. And then a kind of weird side note on that is, since the labor pool for like staffing is so thin right now, I've actually staffed my place with people that I all like know, that are friends, that like are extremely reliable. I don't have like a big staff with high turnover scenario. I have a very small staff of dedicated people who are all really into it. And I feel like, 2 years ago, I probably would have hired a bunch of people who are just like career servers. And while that's not a bad thing, it's just the, lack of those people in the market right now meant that I really had to bring in folks who were like looking for work, that were close to me, and they're all so incredibly reliable and dedicated to the work they're doing, and like dedicated to the space and the beer, and care about it in a way that you can't really get from people who like don't have any investment in it really. And in the same way, just generally, I was always going to start everybody out at $10 an hour and then split tips like front and back of house. Like, so we have a kitchen, we do sandwiches as well as beer. And the plan had always been that everybody has to do both things. And the fact that industry wide now, the wages are raising so that everybody is getting a higher wage, I feel like that's been a generally really good thing to see for everybody. So those are my two takeaways. Like, everybody really did like band together to help other breweries and like share resources and do everything. And then also like the people that you've ended up working with really care about beer and they really care about your product. So I'm super stoked on both of those fronts.
I think that's really cool that you found reliable folks that that you can have in your brewery, and that at any point in time you're not worried about your brewery because you have that crew there. But for anybody else, I worked with Amelia. She's a great leader to begin with already. So,
Thanks,
and had a lot of knowledge already when it came to some of those other areas. So she was good to impart, I'm sure, as a mentor as well. So, being able to do that sounds like quite the benefit. So,
thank you.
I guess we'll move
much.
on to. You're quite welcome. I'm sure we'll hear some more here. We got. Andy, probably next. We'll just keep in that same order for any of our questions we got.
All right. Yeah, I think like Amelia was saying, there's definitely a lot of camaraderie and looking out for each other in the brewery world. I mean, I remember as a nano brewery, I'm pretty sure it was Mike. Again, when I was picking up his garbage at the brewery he was at. So I'm like, yeah, we're brewing tomorrow, like first batch, inaugural thing. And he's basically like, here's my cell phone. If you run into problems, feel free to call me. If you need a part, call me. If you need a hop, call me. Like anything you need, I don't care if it's a weekend, like just hit me up. Like we're here to help. And just seeing that right away. And even from a couple other kind of bigger regional spots where I started to get to know some people, and just the willingness of constantly like, oh, you need this? Yeah, I have it. You can have it. Or I can get you this product. I can get you this hop that no one else can get right now. Like, I have these supply ways. And then when the pandemic hit, just being able to do kind of similar things where initially, everybody ran out of cans, like, nobody saw it coming. And so we had, a partial pallet, and that was quickly running out. And we were just reaching out to anyone in town. And one of the bigger kind of really, really popular spots in town is basically like, oh, like, come on by, we got a partial pallet you can have. So we get there, it's 3 or 4 layers. So it's at least, enough to get us through for a while. And, like, well, what do we owe you? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Like, they weren't going to charge us. We made them go find a price so we can give them something at least, but just like, we want to buy them off you. Like, we don't want you to eat this. But yeah, I think they would have been totally happy to, just to be able to help us out. And then even, and later being able to, I think, like John's doing with his cans, like, we had another big shortage and we just bought 10 pallets worth because that's all we could find, and they had to be shipped across the country. But then in return, we were able to offer those cans to a lot of other small breweries that weren't able to source them and to get them. So just being able to kind of like pay some of it back to other breweries and things like that has been great. And then even, so many steps in our process of trying to get our new facility open, where we have people volunteering to come down and can. Like, people are like, we know you're in a tough spot. Like, we know things are tight, like, we know you can't afford any labor. How about we come help you can for a few hours and just get some cases done, things like that. I mean, a couple of guys that'll come down at like 1 a.m. It's like, if someone will show up, we'll show up. And where, they come down and just like all-nighters hanging out on the canning line. I mean, I guess, whatever it's been taking. And then, people like our electrician friends that have come in to help us out with work, people coming in to clean, people coming in to do whatever they can. I feel like in a lot of ways the pandemic, and I think it's, when you have beer, people often want to help out. You hear the stories of like Lagunitas way back in the day running their canning line for free with a bunch of neighborhood punks, and until they realized how much beer they were losing. But, people have always wanted to be involved with beer. But I think with the pandemic, people have really realized like the small businesses need support. They need, showing up. Like, the guy around the corner that comes in and is like, hey, I got to get my roommates to pay rent, so I'm going to buy a case of beer and give it to them so I'll get rent money. The little funny stories you hear, and just people really rallying around the small business, which I think has been highlighted even more because of COVID and all the repercussions of it. People realize the neighborhood spots are the things that tie the community together. And that's kind of one of the things that we've been leaning more towards, like company wise. Like we like to think of like we're connecting the good. Like, we're connecting good people with other good people. We're connecting, good beer with people. We're connecting so many different good things that I think beer can be an instrumental part of in a healthy community and neighborhood. And just being able to participate and seeing people get excited behind that, I think has really probably been highlighted even more because of, how the last 2 years have gone for everybody.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
All right. Guess it's me. I don't know. It's going to seem like I'm copying because I'm always going last. This isn't fair. No, but honestly, the same to what Amelia and Andrew said. I mean, I had heard being a home brewer and just from going around to different breweries in the Pittsburgh area and meeting brewers and telling them what my thoughts were and what I was thinking. You hear all about the great beer community and the brewer community and how helpful everybody is. And you don't realize it until it actually happens. And so that is probably the most positive thing. I mean, for me, it was just little things like on that opening weekend. I can't even tell you how many of the brewers around the area that I had talked to just showed up on opening weekend just for support. We had one of the brewers from a little brewery around town. They actually went outside for us and helped kind of direct the line traffic for us without me even asking, because we were just crushed on that first day. And they were like, hey, I'm going to go do this for you. And I'm like, great, thanks. And then I looked, I was like, oh, wait, that's so-and-so. No, you don't have to do that. Sit down. And he's like, no, I got it. But yeah, I mean, it was just that is the most positive. And to Andrew's point too, just like I said kind of before, our local community is just huge. we kind of joke at Allusion that, we named it Allusion for two reasons. One, when we were home brewers sitting in the garage brewing and naming our beers, we kind of alluded to classical literature. But the other things is Allusions, because they can reach out and connect a lot of things. We really feel that a brewery in a community is trying to connect that community, like Andrew said, and to see that actually happen through a very tough time that the entire world is going through right now, to see those folks show up and say, hey, you're our local hometown brewery and we are going to do whatever we need to help. Do you need somebody to come in and help clean up, tanks with you after you're done brewing? Just let us know what you're doing. There's been times where I've been in the back after I'm done brewing, cleaning up, and the next thing I know, one of my regulars walks in the door and says, I saw you back here and I saw your assistant isn't here today. Takes off their coat and says, what do you want me to do? And it's just like, great. I'm like, what do you want for this? Nothing, I'll give you a beer, a couple beers. Here you go. We always joke, we pay him beer and pizza, but no, I mean, it's just, that is honestly the most positive, is just seeing the fact, like I said, you hear those rumors and you go, boy, I hope it's true. And then not only do you find out how true it is, but you also find out how much more than the truth there is to it. Even when you start dealing with folks on a national level, like Mike, when I would run into a problem, I'd send Mike an email. Hey, this is what's going on. That's how I met Don. He was like, you know what? I'm not sure about this, but I think Don knows somebody. So I'm going to send the email over to Don. And Don's like, yeah, here's who you want to talk to. And it's like, great. Next thing I know, I'm talking to somebody in Portland that I'd never met in my life. And they're like my best friend telling me what to do. And I'm like, this is great. So that is the most positive, was the fact that was real and even better than anyone I think can expect.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear.
That is definitely a running theme that we see day in, day out, because as much as we deal with new startups, we're dealing with a lot of the people that we've worked with in the past 2-3 years that are either now expanding or pivoting. Like you said, maybe they need an extra tank here or there in order to start some packaging and, get that home delivery going or whatever aspect they need to go in that. But the one thing that keeps coming up is you hear from people that, the community has been huge as a boon for them, and that the help has just kind of made its way to them without even asking sometimes. So that's really, really wonderful. So,
yeah, I mean, I had a similar experience in 2008 and 2010. Besides the camaraderie, one of the things that I saw, and I kind of was wondering if the three of you maybe experienced this, is in those times, other businesses that were non-brewery businesses were struggling, or restaurants only were struggling, or even the restaurant portion of our company was struggling, but beer sales were amazing. They were climbing and they were going. And so we were like just trying to keep up with beer during a time that others were struggling. Has that been a positive? I know, John, maybe we'll reverse it. So you have the equal playing ground here. I'll start with you, John. Is maybe we, did you see beer, besides the positive camaraderie, did you see one of the positive things besides the negative things we hear for some breweries? If you were able to adjust, did you see your beer sales increase? Starting with you, John.
Yeah. So great. Now I actually have to think of something to say. No, but yeah. And it's almost to your point. Being in a small town, what I was able to notice is a lot more collaboration. So when we were having some down times when everything was shutting down, and I mean, like I said, Pennsylvania got really rough there for a while. For a while, we could only have our tap rooms filled to 50% capacity, 25% capacity. People had to buy food with the beer. You couldn't just come in and have a beer. You had to get food. And we weren't planning on having a kitchen. We were planning on doing food trucks, which is big in the Pittsburgh area. And, unfortunately the food trucks weren't coming out during that time. So we were it was one of those things where, okay, we're going to start with some small sandwiches, paninis, some soups, things like that to try and get moving. But it was the positives from that were the local businesses coming in. What are you doing? Oh, this is great. Let me do this. Let me advertise for this. We had a local shop down the street that was coming in and grabbing our to-go menus and handing them out to people as they were coming in, saying, "Oh, you're in town. Are you looking for lunch? Here you go. You can try out these places." We collaborated with a local chocolate shop that's been in the community for about 60 years. And I was like, "Hey, I'm brewing this beer. It's a chocolate stout." And I was like, I wanted to know. And they're like, "Don't even ask. How much chocolate do you need? What kind of chocolate do you need? What do you want? Do you want this? Do you want that? Give it to us." And the day that we launched the beer, they came up and they bought like 4 cases worth of cans. And I'm like, "Oh man, you guys don't have to do this." And then I found out later they were giving away a can down at the shop every time somebody came in and bought something. Like, "Here's this new brewery in town. You got to check this place out. They used our chocolate in the beer. Take this with you. It's one of the best beers I've ever," So to see that, we partnered with a local diner down the street and things like that. That collaboration, that was definitely there. That excitement was there. And it, like you said, Mike, it's more than just the beer community. It's the entire community. So yeah, I did see that coming through, and it was a positive, and it was a great help.
So your beer sales did increase though during this
Yes.
time, because that's one thing I think alcohol, you kind of get back. I think beer is in a sense recession proof. I think it actually does better during some of these times. Andy, how was have you seen your sales? Has that been a positive for you going up? How have you rode the wave?
Initially, when we first got our tap room open, which the good thing of having that open before COVID hit, especially in the neighborhood where it's at, people were like, "There's finally a beer spot here, and like, we're not going to let this thing go under." And so people just started showing up just every day and getting stuff to go, just whatever they could do to support. Again, with the home delivery and things like that, like, it's for us, it kind of stayed a consistent level. It just shifted from a lot of kegs going out where we had regular tap handles, but they're no longer allowed to be open. And so just shifting, filling those kegs into little handheld kegs that people can take home with them. Or, like, we'd see people going on walks in the neighborhood and come in and grab a couple cans. And then 10 minutes later, we see them circling out front, holding up their can like, "Hey." So we saw a lot on the local scale and home delivery increase. But for us, it was more of a flat line. I think part of it was we were kind of maxed out production-wise. I was making the beer as quick as I could. But being on we got it, I kind of turned it into a 3-barrel system, but it was essentially a 1-barrel system that I Frankensteined. And, with an extra tank from Stout, and then got kind of set up so we were able to increase. And I had done that a year or two before COVID hit, but we were already kind of maxed out, so we weren't able to go up. And so for us, it was just trying to stay afloat so we could get to putting beers into these shiny tanks behind me, which we finally are. So we're hoping at this point we start to see more beer being produced and sold. Citywide, I think there's definitely been more beer consumed in the last couple of years. But, I think a lot of that is going the grocery store route, because restaurants still here in town are about half of what they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And so it's just kind of figuring out how to get into some of those distribution circles and things like that. So that'll be if we ever finish this project, which hopefully we will this week, then yeah. So once we get that done, we're hoping to see those increases, and we've kind of like set our space up so that we can quickly add to it if we hit the marks that we're hoping to hit in the coming months and years. So so I guess for us a kind of flatline, but more because we just didn't have any capacity to increase beyond what we could, or beyond what we were, I should say.
So it's me now? Okay.
Yes.
So I didn't say this previously. Obviously, I said that we were in planning when COVID hit. So we didn't actually do our grand opening until June 2021. Which means that basically that was 3 months behind schedule. I'm so glad that you guys had contractors that were like willing to work with you. I'm not good at electrical stuff. I did all of the like finishing work on the floors and the walls and all of that stuff. But man, between permits from the city, which was just like a nightmare, and we got estimates from like 15 different electricians and plumbers before we found ones that would commit to the work. Like, we were on hold for all of that. So we'd been supposed to open in February of 2021, and we didn't open until June. And again, with the pivot scenario, the constant pivot, that's what we did. But our model had always been based on doing most of our sales over the counter. It's the best margin. We all know that. It's like the labor involved is minimal. The markup is nice. And I had hoped that the pandemic would be winding down at that point. So we also did not make great money, but we have the benefit of having food as well. So Kentucky was still at 75% capacity for restaurants in June when we opened, which meant that we didn't have bar seating, but we had 8 tables and we could do everything to go. And we're also in kind of an area that's food desert. So we have a bunch of industrial businesses around us. And that, to be honest, we do better lunches than we do dinners. So food carries us for that part. And then we do a great happy hour for beer. So as far as like the ebb and flow of beer sales, I don't have a good gauge on that because I wasn't open like before. And I guess the one thing that I can speak to is like having come from a brewery only in 2019, and I'm still very close with all the people that work there. Anybody who had a production facility got hit hard because people were not going to bars. And while your grocery store sales are a good portion of your sales, your keg sales they just got decimated. And so I think that the spirit industry did fantastic, as did the wine industry, because those things were things that could be sold via other distribution outlets easily, but not everybody has a kegerator. So like draft just plummeted. And if you weren't already prepared to send things out in package in a meaningful way, the beer industry got hit pretty hard. I think overall, everybody knows we drank more during COVID, like during the whole quarantine months than anybody probably should. But I think that a lot of folks are really hitting spirits and wine harder than they were the beer industry. So I think that some people in the alcohol industry did real well. But I know the place that I used to work for has just opened up 2 new retail locations because the margin there is going to make up for the last like 2 years of just like cans not doing well, because they were only a few years into like really building that industry, and like it didn't hit them well. I'm hoping that the pandemic and the circumstances that we're under right now will still support the model that I want to do, which is like selling most of my product over my own counter and then just doing packaged wild beers for distribution, because you can send those products out. They hold extremely nicely, no matter how long they're on a shelf in warm store at the bottle shop and 500 miles away. And then somebody knows your brand, and hoping that still keeps. But again, we keep on talking about pivoting. So maybe I'll pivot hard. Maybe I'll start doing like a lot of canned regular products. We'll see. But I wasn't open and doing the kind of things that these guys were talking about.
Yeah, the normal has not really been seen by, I think, really anybody yet. For the brewers that have been, in the last basically like two-ish to 3 years, or you may have just got going and then COVID hit. So those are hopefully something that we can look back on and see. I think that like in general, you say alcohol consumption is up. That's usually good for our industry. I know there was probably we have about a little less than 10 minutes, so we'll try to move quickly. We'll stick with Amelia and kind of go back this similar way. Is there anything that you would do different? I guess knowing
lessons
what you
best
know now.
learned.
Yeah, knowing what you know now, lessons learned is maybe one lesson that you could pick on, that you may change for any of the brewers who are listening out there of, you know, what you had to do to make it happen.
Oh man, I feel like the hardest lesson I learned, and it's not going to be a sexy one, is the fact that in government, when it comes to permitting, expecting the right hand and the left hand to talk reasonably is not a reasonable expectation. And you can push carefully and just get the right person on the phone. And what should have taken literally 24 hours will take 2 weeks unless you find the right guy. And then he's like, oh, I have it on my desk. And you're like, can you put it on the next person's desk? And he's like, okay. So just call them, be polite, and move things forward. Like, it was COVID. I was trying to be forgiving of the fact that everybody's understaffed. Half of everybody is working from home. All of the systems of the ways that things were working were not functioning appropriately. But when it comes to moving all of those processes forward, be polite, but don't assume that any of those systems are going to be actually functional, and find the guy that you have to call to move the next thing forward. Because especially during COVID, I was just like, I don't understand why it's taking a month and a half for this. And everyone's like, because half of our staff had COVID and they're all working from home. And I'm like, okay, so I'll just keep calling. Just keep calling. Just keep doing that. It's not a sexy thing to learn, but it definitely is something that could have had me open 2 months earlier with a much bigger operating budget. So do that.
Very good.
Andrew?
Be born into a really, really wealthy family. That would have been a good thing to do if I could change one thing, probably. I don't know. It's hard to even pin down what could have been done. I mean, some things maybe we should have waited on, other things we should have pushed even harder. Like Amelia said, there's definitely a lot of just as nicely as possible pushing on people to get things from one desk to another. Luckily, my business partner is very good at that. He probably has a better working system of the permitting process here in Portland than he ever wanted.
I'm sure he should be running all of the departments at this point, I'm sure.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I mean, absolutely. I would be all for that. So, but yeah, there's so many little things, and it's just constantly pushing. It's an uphill battle. It's it's like, oh, hey, just open a brewery. It's like printing money. It's like, yeah, but it's monopoly money and you can't use it. At least during the opening part, when everything is painfully slow and difficult. So yeah, I mean, definitely have a bigger budget than you think you're going to need. I know that's cliche and everybody says it. The fact we've been able to do this, I mean, it's really been our little tavern that's kept us afloat. That's covered our operating costs. So, when they say plan on not getting paid for a couple of years, it's real, especially during COVID, unless you got that wealthy family. So if anyone's adopting, I'm available.
John, anything you'd want to pass on, do differently, or things for future brewers here?
Yeah, I mean, this was such a strange year that it's kind of hard to say. I wish it was more of a normal year so that you could just sit back and say, yeah, this is the one thing we should have done differently. But I mean, Amelia and Andrew make great points about two things. I mean, just like Andrew, Don, Mike, you've met Robert. So that is our office person right there. So just from meeting him, I'm sure you know how he can be with people so that he can get stuff done. But I let him handle that stuff. I mean, even to this day, even with all that stuff done, we still have, renewing of licensing and just dealing with all of those delays and knowing what to do and how to get it done is there. But like Andrew said, with the old cliche, if there's one thing I would do, and you hear it all the time, everybody tells you when you're planning a brewery, plan bigger. If you're thinking, oh, all I need is, a 3 or 4, 3-5 barrel system, really sit down and think, what are you going to do? What is your plan? What do you want to just have over counter sales? Do you want to start over counter and to go, any type of distribution, things like that, and make sure your budget and what you're planning for is there, because it's definitely more expensive to start and then 6 months, a year down the road say, hey guys, I need more equipment, rather than just start with it, or start with something a little bit bigger. And that's hard to say right now because of the pandemic and everything that's been happening. I mean, there's probably 100 different things that we could have done different, and just not to go back to the one thing that's always been there from when you start talking to people, is just make sure you're planning ahead for what you want to do. Get yourself ready, because to Andrew's point, if you're planning on opening and making money right off the bat and paying yourself, you need to rethink some things. That's not really, that's not how it goes. You just got to make sure that you're ready to survive through those first couple years. And if you're planning properly for it, whether there's a pandemic or not, being able to pivot, as we've all been saying, and make those adjustments. If you're planned properly, it's a lot easier to make those adjustments than if you're just going in to, in an old Pittsburgh term, willy-nilly, right? And saying, hey, we're just going to do this. Yeah, I'm going to start a brewery. Here we go. This is what I'm getting. Oh, that was wrong. I guess I got to do this. You're not going to make it very long. So you really have to make sure you're planning out, know what your business plan is, be willing to have flexible points in it. So for me, I'd be like, I'd love to go back to our business plan and say, what could have been flexible points that we should have pre-planned for and said, this can go away if this needs to come in, or this can go away if something else needs to replace it. That would probably be what I'd say. Plan bigger and make sure you have adjustments available.
Cool.
No, that's great. This has been awesome to hear the points of views from 3 different brewers who have similar but different experiences. Beer brings us all together. It's a small world, small brewery community. Being able to kind of share the knowledge, like you all 3 said, is something that has been invaluable to our industry. Bringing the whole level of our industry up. With that, I'll say thank you, Don. Anything kind of to add on to our talk here?
Yeah, I mean, we got like a minute or two, maybe like, what's your 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay. In which say, we're grateful to have you here for this talk today. I was going to say just regionally, because everybody's in a little bit of a different spot, but bestseller, maybe real quick, if everybody wanted to tell me.
So we do our IPA. Our IPA is basically like a lower IBU IPA that's hopped more like Northwestern style. We don't do New England's because most of them aren't good without lactose, and I don't really like lactose. I collaborate on those, but our IPA is just a really solid guy, and the Kolsch is a close second.
Perfect.
About 20 seconds for the last two of you there. What do you got as your top sellers at each one of you?
West Coast IPA, clean, clear, crisp. We actually call it crispy clean because it's crisp and it's clean.
All right, 10 seconds, John.
We have a tart cobbler series that we do with fruited sours.
Nice.
Wonderful. All
Thank
right,
you
thanks
so much,
a lot,
everyone.
everybody.
And everyone
Nice
for
to
joining us.
see you guys.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Have a good one.